Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, lovely people, depending on where you're watching us from in this beautiful world. And this morning, I'm so excited to have Tessa here with me because Tessa was actually highly recommended by a beautiful friend of mine. The other day, I had a bit of a Hmm, timing issue with a guest that was supposed to come on a podcast, and all of a sudden I was last minute without a guest. And I don't like just canceling a show. I like to see if somebody else wants to take that space. And three beautiful women have actually put up their hand, and Tessa was like, I could make it work, but there's things on. And then somebody else chimed in. I'm like, that's awesome. I want to talk to you. When I heard your story, I was so drawn to it. And now here we are. So I want to say a big thank you to Gemma, who has connected us, who will also be on this podcast in a few weeks. And without further ado, would you do us the honor to introduce yourself to our audience, please? Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, thank you, Gemma, Magical Angel. She's a
Yeah.
story as well, so I can't wait to watch her.
Mm.
Uh yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. It's still such a novelty for me speaking about grief. I've spoken about
Mm.
many things unspoken for many years.
Yeah.
But for grief to be kind of the main character in the story at the moment and the centerpiece of
Mm.
my work is feels really, really beautiful. So for me, my personal story with grief started a long time ago, back when I was 9, turning 10, when my mom was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
I had front row seating to that experience of that her demise, in front of my eyes. So really saw death and the chaos, I guess, it brought up for my family and our whole family dynamics changing through that time
Yeah.
when knowing what to do with the grief, no one, us not having um, a framework or conversations or
Mm.
elders or anyone to
Yeah.
speak about grief or way show us through grief and what we are going through as a family, and
Yeah.
particularly for a little girl, these things just weren't spoken about. We have the
Yeah.
okay things now. There's a lot more awareness
Mm.
around mental health and grief um
Have
and
you got siblings?
yeah, so I have two older sisters. Yeah.
Mm.
I was always the baby though, so they're like 12 and 13 years older than me. So they'd already moved
Yeah.
home.
Wow.
Yeah, so it affected us all differently, in our life
Mm.
phases. Yeah, and of course after her passing, then my life changed
Mm.
like dramatically and then
Mm.
slowly at the same time, So it just meant, dad was then my parent. He was dealing with
Mm.
his grief,
Mm.
not coping, and being
Yeah.
be the strong one, So we all had our own grief stories. One of my sisters had just had a
Yeah.
firstborn, so
Oh,
we were
wow.
trying to deal with that and being a mom without her. My
Yeah. Yeah.
other sister was in her like last semester of uni, trying to finish
Mm.
and focus, on her studies. So it was so big for all of us, and bless them, my family did the best they could with me, not, trying to be present and
Yeah.
just, have some conversations. But I mean, I was always just this wide-eyed, sensitive soul
Mm.
on the planet, very sensitive to
Yeah.
everything. So it just kind of threw me into the underworld. I feel like my hero's journey kind of started there of like, what
Yeah.
is death? Like, where did mum actually go? We weren't
Mm.
religious, and then they'll try to tell me
Mm.
she's got to heaven. I was like, what is heaven?
Mm.
So I didn't really have anything to grasp. I had no framework
Yeah.
to to understand this, this thing through this major
Hmm.
event and this loss of someone who loved me. And as we know with grief, it can bring up so much abandonment, uh, you know,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
experience, and particularly through the lens of a child. So
Absolutely. And I
yeah,
don't think we talk about these things enough at all. Like grief per se, we don't talk enough about it. It is very slowly but surely changing now through people like you and myself and a few other amazing, amazing people doing some advocacy work in the space of grief. Yet back then, if I may say so, there it was really something that wasn't spoken about. It's almost like, you get on with your life. There is no space created for all the emotions that come up, and abandonment being one of them. That really comes up quite a bit, and it wasn't talked about at all. Like grief was like hardly talk about, but
Yeah.
then let alone other emotions that came up with it, like abandonment, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. We actually
Mm.
went to like a social worker after it happened. It must have been recommended
Hmm.
by the hospital or something. So all of
Mm.
us in the
Yeah.
room with the social, nothing, it was
Mm.
nothing good happened. So I think there was some attempt to do something, but there was no real um there's no real framework or understanding or safety, I guess, around that,
Yeah. I find it interesting though that you say the social worker because I, in my childhood, went through things like that for various other reasons. My siblings being adopted, and we had these sharing circles. And I like that there was actually an idea of that framework. We need to create space to share, but I don't feel anybody really knew how to hold them properly, how to not just hold the space, but also encourage real conversations,
Yeah, that
like heart to heart, and not
yeah,
what am I supposed to say? What am I expected to say?
yeah,
That's what it felt like to me a lot when I was young. I'm supposed to say this and I'm
yeah,
supposed to say that, and then you do it, and but it doesn't help per se. So,
no,
where and how did you actually find your framework when
yeah,
you look back now as an adult on your journey from 9 to now?
yeah, beautiful question.
Mm,
I feel what always got me through or helped me process was writing and creativity.
mm,
So I was already writing kind of poetry and just anything before that happened. So my dad was always, always into Australian bush poetry and kind of
hmm.
quite just comical about it. So I
Yeah.
kind of always had this ease of creativity because I just saw it as
Hmm.
this funny thing. He would write poems about us as kids and stuff like that. So I didn't have this kind of block in creativity that some people do. It just seemed to me like this
Mm,
thing to do. So I was always writing poems about the wind talking in the, to me in
hmm.
the country. And so I use creativity a lot and writing a lot through her passing. Like I wrote something even as my my yeah, well, they say eulogy. I don't know if it was a eulogy, but I was asked
Yeah.
to write something, for her
Hmm.
funeral. So very cringy rhyming, but it was beautiful that I was still able to
Mm,
offer something into that space. And
yeah.
through then and all through high school and of course teenage years comes with its own flavor of insecurities and problems. So it was always yeah a huge kind of theme of issues around self-worth and abandonment and insecurities all through that time. But I would write to make sense of it. I would write to express my
Mm,
emotions. I would write just to understand life, this whole life
mm,
concept. I was always asking these deeper questions that no one really seemed to know the answer to. So
yeah.
creativity really helped. I ended up studying psychology to try and find some more answers. That didn't really give me that much in terms
Okay.
of anything. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I excelled though, and I ticked all the boxes and got my first
Mm,
class, honors in psychology and ready to do my master's, but
hmm.
I just never went and did my doctorate or my master's because
Yeah.
it just didn't feel deeply true to me what was being taught there.
Mm,
Felt like that was missing, like we were missing this thing I could feel but couldn't name, couldn't have the language
yeah.
for. So my journey kept going. I kind of fell into more social work and social welfare, social justice work right at
Mm,
the front line. So with child protection and DV and homelessness and mental health. And I
mm,
worked with asylum seekers and refugees. So I kind of feel like I was this detective on the ground, just trying to work out the human psyche and myself through it, but really other people in pain and struggle. And of course, underpinning all that was grief, was
yeah.
people not able to be their true self. So I speak a lot in my work of true self expression and true self suppression. So I saw through everyone, regardless, of their culture, their background, their story. When they're in front of me, there was all this level of their true self being suppressed,
Mm,
them not knowing who they truly are, or different
mm,
barriers or social barriers, or family experiences limiting who they were,
yeah.
Um, and there was a pain in that and a grief in that, and
Yeah.
the grief of really living in this world as it is, and I think that's
Mm,
the piece that's also missed with grief and
yeah.
bigger conversation I like to have with grief, not just about bereavement, but around existing. Like to live
Yeah.
is to know love, is to know grief. This all
Mm,
ends. So for me, yeah, there was all of this personal experience, professional experience, and then in 2020, my dad passed away from cancer as well. And so that really felt like this kind of reckoning with grief in its final
Yeah.
stages. And it was and me being able to walk through grief, not as that little 10-year-old girl,
Yeah.
but as the woman who now can be with the depth
Mm.
of of the portal that grief asks us to walk through.
Yeah.
The and the multidimensional nature of
Yeah.
grief.
I want to get into exactly what you just said, like you going through grief the second time around, um, as an adult, as a woman, as the woman who has done so much work to understand the human psyche and not as a 9 or 10 year old little girl anymore. Um, can you share a little bit about that? Because you and I talked quite a bit in the background before we went live, and what stands out for me and where I feel so much alignment between your message and mine is you also talk about the gifts in grief. I call them the hidden gifts in adversity. You call them the gifts in grief. I love the message because I feel when my dad passed, I was 20, and yeah, definitely a lot older than you. And this is not about comparison. This is just about getting the facts where I was, where you were at that time. And I had no tools, no framework, no idea how to handle grief. It was really confronting and excluding from me. I felt very excluded from all my friends because I felt I was the only one this happened to. Nobody understands what I'm going through. And in my small world, that was the case. And then when my husband passed away, I had done all this work and all this, like you, I had my massive journey with mindset, with understanding, with learning about how the human mind works, how emotion work, how you can actually sit with them and allow them to bring you gifts, to bring you messages, to bring you understanding. What was it like for you to go through this experience? Because I felt that having learned about myself, my mindset, having worked through grief in an unhealthy way, but in a very long way to get to where I was at, and
Mm,
then also live this life with my husband through the lessons I have learned through my dad's passing in
mm,
such a different and very present way. There were so many gifts in that, and I feel that without that first grief, I may have not received all these gifts and may have not lived that depth in my relationship.
mm.
I'm just putting it out there. What was that for you, and where did you find your gifts in grief from your mom's passing to your dad's passing?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing more. Yeah,
Mm,
it's fascinating looking at the thread of grief, I guess, in our life. And
mm,
I think it ties in with the question before as well around the framework of grief. And for me, what I've come to name, and this is the experience I was going through with my dad, but I'll just name it here
mm,
with the body of work that's come through me with revolutionary grief is understanding, or for me, my belief and what I've been teaching is that we have an internal grief template, and
mhm.
that that's really cultivated by our early experiences of grief, what we witness, what we're told by grief of
Yeah.
to grieve, and that kind of shapes our our system of how we
Mm,
grieve as as we move forward. And that could be based in suppression based or expression based.
mm.
So I think
I
large,
love that.
yeah,
Mm,
it kind of
mm.
is
It simplifies
positive.
something that is so, yeah, so important. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that forward because it helps simplify. And I work through with revolutionary grief, we work through the 5 elements. So
Hmm.
so it keeps this really natural, organic evolution process of grief,
Hmm.
from earth, water, fire, air to ether. So it really looks at the multidimensional
Mm.
nature of grief. So
Love
that's
it.
where I'm at now, and that's what I'm teaching, and that's what, yeah, I'm reveling now because these gifts that I have received from grief, I'm now able to share and see
Mm.
the epiphanies and see the healing, see people move through more openness to life,
Mm.
ultimately, and openness to love, openness to creativity because they're willing to meet the edges of grief. And
Mhm.
so for me, with dad, this is as I said, I didn't have the nice words that I have now for it because it was still a process from then till now. But at the time, what was happening for me is instead of choosing that suppression-based template, I was choosing my expression-based template. I was
Mhm.
using my creativity. I was drawing on all the things that I had actually naturally known. It's kind of like I felt like I had a bit of parallel uh, experiences in my life where I had all this suppression, but something in me always knew you have to get it out.
Mm.
Our story needs to be witnessed. So,
Yeah, beautiful.
and I knew that from a young age. So when I was with my mom at age 15 or 16,
Hmm.
I wrote about her story for an English assignment.
Hmm.
It was it was finally in my yeah, it was just like a perfect opportunity to write. And that piece of writing moved the teacher to tears. It was
Oh.
this piece of writing that just detail, was this autobiographical piece, I think was
Mm.
the theme. And it became this piece of writing that then my family read. And because we had lived largely unspoken, hadn't spoken
Yeah.
about her, it became this piece of writing that acted as a way of conversation, right?
I
Like,
love this. I
and then
love this.
what was really powerful then was like the year after the school called for like a public speaking competition. I was shy.
Mm.
I used to stutter, so expression's
Mm.
been like my gift and curse. So I was like stuttery little shy sensitive girl, and through the creativity, through the expression, finding myself and my voice. And I was called, I didn't know what intuition was back then or anything like that, right? But I was
Mm.
like called from here to speak, to go into the spot, like
Wow. Oh, it just gave me goosebumps. I love this. Oh my
and, and
God.
and tell the story, and like to use that story is very specific like guidance, again, didn't have
Mm.
the words for it back then. I was a
Mm.
16-year-old girl, but I entered this competition, and I told my story, and every time I told it, like I felt something, I felt energy move through me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone else felt it, and
Mm.
I kept winning. And I was going up against people that, which was obviously never the point of it. I just kind of went. I was just like I was just trusting
Mm.
in
Yeah.
something greater, and I kept winning. And um, the judges would always come up to me afterwards and say, "This is so courageous. Like what you're saying is so
Mm.
courageous." But to me,
Mm.
it didn't feel like courage. Like it just felt like
Yeah.
I had to do it. Like it had to come out. Like it had
Like
to
a calling. Yeah.
something in me
Amazing.
it had
Mm.
to get out of me.
But what beautiful reassurance as well and encouragement to receive that feedback every single time. It's incredible.
It was beautiful. It was such a beautiful
Yeah.
experience. It really
Mm.
anchored something in me. And I was going up against these girls, because I was like from a country public school, so I was going up
Mm.
against these girls who'd been doing this competition for years in private school, and like just kept winning.
Yeah.
Just this funny experience. And then I go into the state finals. And what was so beautiful and really funny when I look back is that for the state finals that they would fly you to Cairns it was, and also fly
Hmm.
your family. So we had this like
Oh,
healing experience of my sisters
I
and
love
my
this.
dad
Oh.
going through the story of my mom, right? Like, so there's been something in me that's always known that I'm here to help people express themselves, to help true
Mm.
self-expression. And I guess coming back to then when dad was um, passing, and guess a part of the gift of that was we had he was diagnosed like the year before, so we had nearly like 18 months I think with him before he
Mm.
passed. So even that was different, and really being
Yeah.
at when is he going, what's happening, that which people will know if they've been in that, like this portal of
Mm.
like this liminal space of what's,
Mm.
but through that space, approaching it intentionally this time, and as this woman, allowing all the triggers, like so much came up through my body. Like he's just started sharing these stories of all sorts of things, and I went on quite the experience with him being unwell. But it would
Mm.
trigger things in me or memories that I had suppressed from not like 8, 9, from
Wow.
um
Wow.
all of a sudden he was dying, but I parts of me were coming to life.
Mm. Beautiful. That
Yeah.
that is, oh my God, this is so amazing. I was your dad actually aware of how much he was helping you in his passing to heal those things, or were you just not at that stage where you could express that or make sense of it?
Not on that, no, not on this consciousness level, no.
Yeah.
But there
Well,
was
at
just
least he knows now.
exactly, and
Yeah.
that's the thing, and this is the conversations I have with my clients, my students now, like the
Mm.
depth of me walking through that and actually connecting on a soul level to him. It was just my private communion. I couldn't really speak to many people about it,
Yeah.
and there was things happening that I couldn't even fully understand, but I had the awareness and the spiritual
Mm.
maturity to hold, and the emotional capacity to hold and to be with the high aspects of consciousness from him and I.
Yeah.
Um, so I let myself journey with that quite privately,
Hmm.
through that passageway, and it felt very, grief is a very sacred, passageway. So
Yeah.
I was able to move through that, but over the years, as I've seen other people in this experience, have been able to share, yeah, those that we can connect on that high level to the soul and really
Mm.
have conversations around what needs to be moved through before the passing, because I was kind of
Yeah.
clear of like, I've been moving through grief with mom like for 20 years, I don't want to take on
Mm.
your stuff. Like your karma is your karma. Like I don't want to hold it, I
Mm.
don't want to spend another 20 years in
Yeah.
self-therapy with this.
But what an awareness, though, that you had come to. This is incredible. This in itself is such a gift to have that.
Yeah, I've got little goosebumps. Yeah, yes, it was. It
Oh.
really was. It made it
Mm.
very, very, words don't seem to do it justice. Like it's
Mm.
just the most sacred, beautiful thing. So
Mm.
instead of this loss, I mean, loss is happening all the time because change is happening all the time.
Mm.
Grief is loss, so grief is happening all the time. But instead of it being shaped by this pain and this confusion, I guess, the confusion of that 10-year-old girl of what,
Yeah.
where'd she go, was heaven, I had this
Mm.
understanding of transitioning and other side and
Mm.
connection, and our relationship will remain, right?
Mm.
That physically you won't be here, and I
It's
get
just different. Yeah.
it's different, and I so get to be with all the younger parts of me and myself now that will miss him and still miss him and
Mm.
still miss
Mm.
his voice, and
Mm.
I get to speak to him and connect with him in a different
Yeah.
capacity, so
Yeah.
that was the real difference, and being able to write through that, express through that, just allowed that experience to be so, yeah, painful and beautiful at the same time, right? It's being able to hold that duality of life and death, and
Mm.
walk through it. So
Yeah.
huge gifts, huge gifts. And I guess the other piece for me was seeing, I guess with both, yeah, mom and dad, I'm still, therapist background, so I, see our mother issues and our daddy and mummy issues and daddy issues in
Mm.
everyone and our inner child pieces. So there was huge pieces there for me of that have still played out over the last few years of really recognizing, yeah, my relationship to the feminine and the masculine, and really being able to
Mm.
reflect back to myself and look at where
Yeah.
maybe not taking responsibility, need to look deeper,
Yeah.
those dark edges, which are hard for us to all look at, and those shadowy places, but really
Yeah.
being able to look, how can I bring more wholeness here? How can I shine the light on myself here? How can I see what I've learned and what I've inherited,
Mm.
and go past that, evolve past that? So
I,
certainly,
I want to ask you something about this because this is really fascinating to me. This whole work between divine masculine, divine feminine. I've done a lot of work with my clients around that, in particular in the retreat spaces that we held. And when you just said that for the first time, I just had this thought of I never thought about what it would be like for a young girl because mostly, I'd say the majority of my clients are widows and at least 90%. And then there's some widowers, and then sometimes it comes to child loss, suicide, etc. as well. But the majority of my clients are widows. So there was always this talk around when Rob passed away, when my husband died, I automatically stepped into divine masculine. I became the protector, the provider. I had to be the strong one, the fearless one. And I did not think about that in those words, although I had all the tools, the training, the words, but I was in survival mode at first. So I didn't think this through. I just did, I acted. And that in itself was already divine masculine that I stepped into. And it wasn't until my first relationship after Rob died that my divine feminine came out to play, like really wanting to be seen, wanting to indulge in my softness, in my nurturing, in my playfulness. And it was really interesting for me to not only learn so much through that process myself that I'm now teaching, but also now when you said that with a little girl, I'm wondering, being a girl, having lost your mom, if your divine feminine came out a lot earlier, then it would have naturally come out because all of a sudden there was this requirement of you. There is the element of the divine feminine now missing in this household. Did you step up into more of that, for the lack of better words?
Beautiful question.
Or
Totally get it. Yes, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So yes, so I'm a Cancer star sign as well and lots of other things. So
Mm.
that's the archetype of the Divine Mother anyway. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I became a mother to myself. Um
Mm.
I did live in that household for a little while, and then I went to live with one of my sisters, beautifully,
Wow.
yeah, in her household. So
How
uh,
old were you when you moved to your sister?
like 11. It was like the year after.
Wow.
Quite a tumultuous period of
Wow.
yeah, before that. So
Mm.
two things here. One, I kind of always felt like I grew up with three mothers anyway, with my mum and two sisters because
Yeah.
they're older,
The
so they were
sisters being so much
playing,
older. Yeah.
yeah, they were playing
Yeah.
that mother role. So I had a great protection in that, and I will be the first to
Beautiful.
admit and thank them and love them. Like
Mm.
they didn't have them, but I had them.
Yeah.
They lost their one and only one, but I had these other two beautiful protective
Yeah.
forces in my life.
Hmm.
Yeah, that of course didn't save me from an internal emotional struggle of 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 yeah, of who am I now without my mom,
Mm.
and the trust issues of, well, those who, if can I trust anyone, can I let anyone in if the person who loved me most can disappear in an instant.
Yeah.
So me becoming a mother to myself, I think, and more so probably a mother to others. That's probably where it showed up first, right? Before
Mm.
and that's the psyche kind of trying to heal itself and work itself out. But there was a little abandoned girl and scared, and dad,
Mm.
even though he was physically alive, there was an emotional abandonment there. So I was kind of always daddy's little girl. So I was actually quite like, I was very close to him, but then he was not able to be emotionally present, right?
Mm.
So I felt in that way, and being able to look back and do all the work, can see that I felt a loss and abandonment of both. So I felt
Yeah.
the,
I hear you.
and then because I moved out and away from dad as
Mm.
well, so our relationship was quite ruptured for a while until I intentionally made sure I reconnected and did that work. But to answer your question, yeah, the divine mother aspect was yeah, I was quite known for that, and look at the work I fell into. Like I fell into this like youth work, looking after kids. I was like,
Amazing.
and of course, and I didn't realize until I had all these frameworks later, like part of me was trying to save myself. Like I really needed to turn that mother
Of
loving essence
course.
to myself, as we all do. That's such the key, and a key in
Hmm.
all my work. I still do
I
today.
agree.
It's the big heart of
Look who I work
compassionate
with.
women. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
so we'll do
Mm.
anything for everyone else, and we'll overgive
Mm.
and give and love and love and love, and we'll want to save people and pets and the environment and
Mm.
thing. And but that little girl in us is usually in the basement of our psyche down there, actually the one
Yeah.
love and support. So that's been a big part of my own healing. But yeah, that absolutely, like the mother aspect, the feminine aspect was very present in me first, and I think intuitive,
Wow.
the creating, the nurturing, I've been
Mm.
creating the safe space for others that I didn't have. Of course, it's
Yeah.
a gift and curse, and it's actually been, yeah, since my dad passing, actually working on that father line and seeing how
Mm.
much, because I felt an absence from him after the death, not before, then I was becoming absent in my own masculine structures.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the
Mm.
rewriting that I've been doing from, yeah, body up and top down to come into wholeness. Our soul wants that union of both.
I can't thank you enough for sharing all of this. This is really, really beautiful and so straight from your heart and soul. I really love this. I never know where these conversations really go, despite knowing some of your story beforehand, but I just love what unfolds here in this space. And I know you've touched a lot already on what you do, but can you go a little bit deeper into the work that you do and how people can actually reach out to you? Because I can only imagine how many people would feel that calling, because I can feel it sitting here with you, the beautiful space that you create, and it just feels really safe to be here with you, to share space with you. I really feel that quite deeply. So I would like to extend that to the audience, and maybe you can share a little bit more about what you do and how people can reach out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way, yeah, IG, Facebook, email. So I'll give
Mm,
you those details in terms of,
yeah.
yeah, I'm a real human, so you can have a conversation with me and say
Love
hello.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it's always relationship first with me, yeah, and
Mm,
I want to know, yeah, who's in my world and why you resonate, and yeah, if I can support you. The work I'm doing at the moment, so I have an Institute of Open-Hearted Psychology, so that's where I do a lot of transformational work, hero's journey work, really supporting people to move from true self-suppression into true self-expression. So I bring in my own kind of philosophies and drawing from ancient wisdom and some modern psychology that I do that I do like, and weaving that into frameworks and really transformational journeys, adventures that we can get to know ourselves on, because I think that's the greatest gift of knowing
mm,
ourselves, expressing ourselves, knowing how to build intimacy with ourselves, with those dark edges
yeah.
to get to, so we can
Mhm.
show up fully in relationships, so we can actually be alive while we're alive, right? Like we can actually enjoy this
I love
experience.
that.
Like that's the gift of
Yeah.
grief. Like it's the
Yeah.
this all ends. So what are we
Mm,
gonna do while we're here? Like that's really what my work is about now, you know?
yeah.
Um, and I also, part of that is revolutionary grief. So that's my new transformational program specifically around
Mm,
gifts of grief. And we're halfway through the first round at the moment. And it's so stunning, so beautiful. I'm just obsessed with
mhm.
being in that space. And it nearly feels like, not wrong, but like grief can be so heavy. We've spoken about this before. Like grief can be so heavy
Yeah.
and painful, and it is all it's everything, right? It's everything. And I think I've spent so much time in those spaces that I've transformed it and alchemized it through these frameworks into this joy, into this
Mm.
aliveness. So that gets to be testament of what's possible, but in this space
You're
it
speaking my language.
yeah, yeah, this is what I was drawn to as well, because I think there can be, yeah, spaces in grief that it is, yeah, circulating that pain. Well, really, I want to always step into the transformation of it, which I know you do as well.
Mm,
What's
mm.
deeper here? Like life change is the only constant. Like life is impermanent.
Yeah.
Death is part of it. So it's more for me, the work we do in revolutionary grief is two-pronged. One is identifying your suppressed grief. So we work through the five elements to look at where are you holding on to grief. And a big one that people have had huge epiphanies around is the earth element, actually looking at not just ancestral grief but the impact of colonization and capitalism on our everyday life
Mm,
and our life so far. So we do that. And then what I help people do is build a loving relationship with grief, because it's not going anywhere.
mm.
Like change is always happening. With all change comes loss, and with
Yeah.
loss comes grief. So how do we build an open, freeing, respectful, nourishing relationship with grief that we can
Mm,
exist in every day, which is really this essence of I'm alive now, this
yeah.
how can I access beauty now? So that's yeah, that will be available in the different format in a way to enroll at any
Yeah.
time basically, because grief happens
Yeah.
all the time. So
Yeah.
they're the ways that would be most relevant here. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. I know we're a little bit over time now. However, I always love finishing off with one question. And by the way, we will be sharing all the links in the show notes, so you can actually find Tessa on Instagram and all the social links that she'll be sharing. They will be in the show notes shortly after our interview here. And before we go, if you had one message that you would like to wrap up for people to take home, if it's just one thing they get away from this conversation, what would you like that to be for people?
Mm, beautiful question.
Mm.
I think grief is the portal. Grief is the portal to your greatest aliveness. Yeah, don't be afraid to meet it.
I love this. Ooh. What a beautiful way to finish our conversation, Tessa. I cannot thank you enough. This has been one of my most favorite conversations, and I just really, really love that you stepped into this space with me. And I feel very, very honored having shared this space with you. So, anyone who wants to connect with Tessa, please come back, check the show notes, follow her on Instagram, connect with her, and have that conversation. It's just absolutely beautiful. You have a beautiful day. Thank you for being here. And this is Tessa and Marie signing off. Bye
Bye.
for now.
Thank you.
Oh, I always do this. I need my glasses.